Shri Gurubhyam Namaha. This is Hemalata from Punvidyashram. Today's session is from Geography, Chapter 2, Globe, Latitudes and Longitudes. From the previous session in Geography, you would have clearly understood that the Earth is not a sphere. It is slightly flattened at the north and the south poles and bulge in the middle. Have you ever seen a globe? It is a true model, that is, miniature form of the Earth. We can see many countries, continents and oceans on the globe. It is difficult to describe the location of a point on a sphere like the Earth. Now, the question arises as to how to locate a place on it. We need certain points of reference and lines to find out the location of places. It is easy to locate a place on the flat surface with reference to another place. Since spherical objects like the Earth neither have corner and sides nor top and bottom, it is difficult to locate a place on it. Every point on the globe is like any other point. Therefore, in order to know the location and direction of a place on the surface of the Earth, we have to develop some method or technique. We have to evolve or find certain points or lines which can be used as reference for locating places on the Earth. So for that reference, we had created some parallel lines for our reference, which is an imaginary line. So you will notice that a needle is fixed through the globe in a tilted manner, which is called its axis. 2 points on the globe through which the needle passes are 2 poles. So the upper pole and the southern pole. So the upper pole is called as North Pole and the other one is the South Pole. The globe can be moved around this needle from west to east, just as the Earth moves. But remember, there is a major difference. The real Earth has no such needle. It moves around its axis, which is an imaginary line. Another imaginary line running on the globe divides it into 2 equal parts. This line is known as the equator. So for the globe, for the Earth, we had separated it into 2 parts. So the upper part and the lower part. To divide these parts, there is an imaginary line which has been drawn in the center of the Earth, and it was named as equator. The northern half, that is the top part of the Earth is known as the northern hemisphere, and the bottom part is called as the southern half is known as the southern hemisphere. They are both equal halves. Therefore, the equator is an imaginary circular line and is very important reference point to locate places on the Earth. All parallel circles from the equator up to the poles are called parallels of latitude. Just like equator is an imaginary line, we had lot of imaginary parallel lines to the equator. So these parallel lines are called as parallels of latitudes. Latitudes are measured in degrees. For that parallel lines, which is measured in degrees, the equator represents the 0 degree latitude. Since the distance from the equator to either of the poles is 1/4 of a circle round the earth. It will measure 1/4 of 360 degrees. That is 360 divided by 4 is equal to 90 degree. Thus 90 degrees north latitude marks the North Pole and 90 degrees south latitude marks the South Pole. Such as all parallels north of the equator are called north latitudes. Similarly, all parallels south of the equator are called south latitudes. Just as the northern part above the equator is called as northern hemisphere, the parallels which run to the north of the equator, that is the above of the equator, all the parallels are called north latitudes. As wise the parallels which runs below the equator, the south of the equator, are called south latitudes. The value of each latitude is therefore followed by either the word north or south. Generally, this is indicated by the letter N or S. To mention the latitudes which are above the equator will be mentioned with the degree and the symbol N. N means north. As wise to mention the parallel latitudes which runs below the equator, we use S symbol which denotes south. For example, both Chandrapur in Maharashtra and Belo Horizonte in Brazil, South America, are located on parallels of about 20 degree latitude. But the former is 20 degree north of the equator and the latter is 20 degree south of it. We therefore say that Chandrapur is situated at 20 degree north latitude and Belo Horizonte is situated at 20 degree south latitude. If you see this image, you can see that as we move away from the equator, the size of the parallels of latitudes decreases as the center of the earth is bulged and the poles are small. The parallels also decreases towards the poles. The parallels or the lines of latitude have the following characteristics. The equator is the largest parallel. The length of the other parallel decreases as one moves away from the equator towards the poles. All parallels are located at an equal distance from each other. The distance between any two parallels at an interval of 1 degree on the surface of the earth is about 111 kilometer. For 1 degree it is 111 kilometer on the surface of the earth. The equator is the only great circle while the other parallels are all small circles. Now we will see some important parallels of latitude. We have almost 360 degrees. We have each degree as a parallel. But we have some certain parallels which is important to mark it, to measure it. So besides the equator, the North Pole, that is 90 degree north, and the South Pole, that is 90 degrees south, there are 4 more important parallels of latitudes. That they are Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere, which is marked in 23.5 degree north. Tropic of Capricorn, same 23.5 degree, but it is on the south, it is in the southern hemisphere. The Arctic Circle at 66.5 degree north of the equator, that is above the equator, near the North Pole. Antarctic Circle at 66.5 degree south of the equator, that is near to the South Pole. The heat zones of the Earth. All parts of the Earth do not receive the same amount of heat from the sun. The above important parallels help us to divide the Earth into 3 heat zones. So can you now understand why we mentioned these 4 as important parallels? Because we can calculate the amount of heat that we receive between these parallels. So the above important parallels help us to divide the Earth into 3 heat zones. There are 3 heat zones: Torrid Zone, Temperate Zone and Frigid Zone. The Torrid Zone is where all places located between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So the place between Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn is called as Torrid Zone. Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn experience the vertical rays of the sun at least twice a year. This region receives the maximum amount of heat and is called the Torrid Zone. The word torrid means hot. So between Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, the sun have the vertical rays which receives the highest maximum amount of the heat. The next one is Temperate Zone. Outside the Torrid Zone, they have the experience of slanting rays of the sun and receives less heat. These areas are called temperate zones. So that from the Tropic of Cancer to Arctic Circle, this particular place is called as temperate zone. So from Tropic of Capricorn to the south and till the Antarctic Circle is another temperate zone. The north is called as North Temperate Zone and the southern portion is called as South Temperate Zone. So here the sunlight is falling in a slanting way. So the sun rays passes in a slanting way. So then they will receive the less heat, not as much as the equator receives. They receive less amount of heat. In the northern hemisphere, the area between the Tropic of Cancer and the Arctic is known as the North Temperate Zone. In the southern hemisphere, the area between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Arctic Circle is known as the South Temperate Zone. The next one is Frigid Zone. Frigid zone beyond the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. So the north and the North Pole above the Arctic Circle and the South Pole which is below the Antarctic Circle is mentioned as frigid zone. It is very cold as these areas receive extreme slanting rays of the sun. Thus, these areas are called frigid zone. The North Frigid Zone lies between Arctic Circle and the North Pole, which is in the 90 degree. The South Frigid Zone lies between the Antarctic Circle and the South Pole. Now we will see from the equator up to north. So equator, Tropic of Cancer, Arctic Circle, then North Pole. From the equator to below, the parallel latitudes are equator, Tropic of Capricorn, Antarctic Circle and frigid zone. So we have three heat zones. Torrid Zone is the place where the maximum amount of heat has been received. Then temperate zones, where the earth is receiving a slanting rays of sun, so it receives less amount of heat. At the frigid zones we receive extreme slanting rays, so that place is very cold. In our next session we will discuss about longitudes. So in this session we had discussed about latitudes, the parallel lines, equator, parallels of latitudes, 4 important parallels and the heat zones, 3 heat zones. In our next session we will study about the longitudes in detail.